So, Alice, over there. Thank you. Just the first slide. So, you get me in for the first few minutes just to do a brief introduction and talk to you, for those that maybe aren't familiar with the DIP, just talk to you a little bit about what the DIP is, and then I'll hand over to Chris, Kevin and Rob to talk you through some of the more technical elements of the slides, and then I'll do a brief close out at the end. So, excuse me, I'll see if we can put the slides on. That would be good. And another one. There you go. So, my name is Richard Watkin. I'm the delivery manager for the programme. I'm joined today by Rob Golding, who's our solution architect, Kevin Gleeson, who's our security architect, and Chris Wood, who is the Alexon Enduring DIP manager. So they're the guys that will be talking you through the subsequent slides. We're going to talk to you today about the DIP onboarding. I'll leave that to them. I'm just going to give you a brief overview of what the DIP is, just in case you're not aware. So I think you've seen many times today, because I've been watching online, the TOM, and you'll have seen a big purple box that sits at the bottom of that. It is the next slide. And that's the DIP. So the DIP sits in the centre of the TOM and helps to process all of the industry flows. It's an event-driven architecture component that basically is going to help to integrate and process all of the messages. It's obviously quite a large piece of work technically, so we went through a large contracting process at the back end of last year, and we appointed a DIP service provider. That was a company called Avanade. For those that joined the webinar earlier this year, you'll have been familiarised with them. Some of you have been over to see us today as well and introduced those guys. If you haven't, of course, try and come and find us later. If you've got any questions generally on the DIP, some of the Avanade representatives are here today as well. So any particular questions on the DIP later on, then please feel free to come and find us. So subsequently, after appointing Avanade in January, we've been getting on with the design build phase, ready for testing in the future. That's currently going well, and we're on track to hit M9. So that's where we are at the moment. Alice, if you want to just jump forward, and we'll show you the TOM again. There you go. So it's that big purple box that sits in the middle and processes all of the different industry flows. That's the generic overview of the DIP. Today we're here to talk about the onboarding process. So what does it mean for you as participants to get from a point of currently not being on the DIP to being on the DIP and then utilising it moving forward. So I'll hand over to Chris to start with, who'll talk you through the high-level overview, and then the other guys will talk you through some of the technical parts as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Richard. As Richard said, Chris Wood, I work for Alexon, I'm not part of the programme. What we're looking at is the enduring operation of DIP. So once the market-wide has been implemented, how we're actually going to use it in anger, so to speak, and how we're going to do the governance, the operation, the funding, budgeting and everything else, and the change process as well going forward, which is what we're going to talk you through today. The way we've taken it from DIP is we'll look at the enduring processes first, and they're going to be replicated then into sit and sit, but with a few minor changes, and similarly within the transition immigration process as well, but again with a couple of minor changes at the mechanical, minor details level. So if we go to the first slide, please. So there's 5 essential steps to DIP onboarding. As you can see on the screen there, the initial bit is where you come to us and say, hi, I want to use the DIP. This is why I want to use it. And that potentially, you either come to us through the front door, or you come through a code body. If you are a rec party, you can go to rec, they'll pass your details on to BSC code. If you're a rec and BSC potential party, again, BSC will pass the details on to us. We'll go through that. The second stage, the organisational setup, is when you say, this is who we are, this is how we're going to be set up. These are the MPOs, market participant organisations we have within our setup. Go through that whole process. The third step is us checking that we believe what you've told us. I'm sure you have told us the truth, but obviously we need to verify that for reasons that I'm sure you can imagine. We'll then go through the testing process, and then we'll move you to the production environment, and that's the end part where you can actually use the DIP for real, what you want to use it for sending your messages, all the information around the industry and everything else. So to move on to the first stage, please. So online application, as I said, there'll be 2 ways of doing that. Primarily, if you're feeding to the rec or the BSc, you'll go through the code bodies. They'll give us all of the information. So the idea is that you just provide that information once to whichever code party you're receiving through, and then between the rec, BSc, and ourselves, we'll share all of that information. Or if you're not acceding to the rec or the BSc, so if you're going to be a DIP connection provider, DCP, for example, there'll be a front door entrance where you can come to the DIP and do your onboarding through that as well. We, the DIP manager, somebody I'm going to train, not necessarily me, but someone I will train, will do the initial reviews, which is, it's a sense check for all intents and purposes. Are you coming to us for a good reason? Do you have a business reason to do that? Have you come to the right place? We may send you back to the code body. That's the best way to do it. We'll be liaising with the code bodies throughout, as it says there. Make sure that what we're doing with the onboarding tallies with their qualification process, and we're speaking to each other at the right stage. And ideally, we're going to try and make the customer journey as smooth as possible, so that if you are providing information, you only have to provide it once, I've already said, but you don't have to repeat all of that information. We try and build as much automation into that process as we possibly can. We then need to know who your nominating officer is, i.e. your responsible grown-up, the person who's going to take the blame when it all goes wrong. Should be a C-suite person. We accept it may not actually be that person who types the thing, but it'll be their name on the form, and they'll be the responsible person. And then we'll go through the verification process. And then we'll split the onboarding into two separate processes. There, we've got the functional process, which is the automated fees, the security certificates, make sure that your systems can speak to our system and it all works properly. And then we've got the non-functional processes, which is my world. Unfortunately, that's probably going to take a little bit more time. That's where we're looking at your governance and your processes within you as an organisation. So do you have a DPIA, if appropriate, depending on your role and your size? Do you have processes for message handling? Can you deal with a cybersecurity breach? Are you ISO 27001 certified? In which case, can we just take some of that evidence there on repeating it and go through that whole process there? So that's stage one. Hand over to Rob, who's going to take you through stage two.
Thanks, Chris. Next one, please. Hopefully everybody knows me. I'm Rob Golding. I'm the Solution Architect on the programme. When we looked at jumping all too right there. Yeah, right. Okay, thanks. When we looked at DIP onboarding, we thought about the different types of DIP users that would come along, and we broke them down into 4 different types of users. So if you're not one of these 4 users, please put your hand up because we would like to know. So we've considered just general MPO, market participant organisations. These are the people that appear in ISD. So a very simple setup where they've got one or a couple of MPIDs. The second type is umbrella organisations. So organisations such as DNOs or some large suppliers where you might have a portfolio of companies and you might want to administer all those companies under one DIP account. So they're the 2 main types of DIP users. The third is DIP connection providers, people that provide services to market participants and they act on the DIP on their behalf. Now, even if you're a market participant and you do employ the services of a DIP connection provider, you still need to onboard to the DIP. You need to onboard to the DIP to get DIP IDs, which I'll go to in the next slide. And the 4th type of company are just general non-active participants in the DIP, but code bodies such as Ofgem or RECCO that want access to the DIP reports. So if anybody doesn't fit into any of those 4 bands, I'd love to know. This is a form I looked up for Avanade, just to show the type of information we're expecting for when a company on board. So it's just a company number, company name, and the MPID and market roles, if known, and the DIP, requested DIP roles as well. Supporting information and whether you're going to act as a DIP connection provider or not. And then, as Chris was saying earlier, details of the company officials. So the most important one is obviously the nominating officer, the person that is responsible for the company's, the overall company, and obviously a market participant admin as well, so they can start to configure the company within the DIP. I've got a separate box at the bottom to deal with any potential umbrella organisations that want to have their child companies appointed at the same time. Obviously, if you do on board, you can update these details once you're fully onboarded. Next slide, please. So what's this slide about? So this slide is when once you're onboarded and you get access, Chris has granted you access to the DIP, you need to allocate your DIP IDs. Now your DIP IDs need to align to the ISD data. So hopefully everybody's familiar with ISD entities 45 and M16, which are effectively the address books for the whole industry. When you first go in, if you're set up in ISD 45, you'll know your MPID and market role pairs. Against each of those pairs, you'll need to allocate a DIP ID, which again, there's a mock-up screen on the next slide. If you're a DIP connection provider, you will need to ask to be allocated a certain number of DIP connection provider IDs, and the guidance is you need one DIP connection provider ID for each of the companies you're representing. Once that is all set up, so this is all going to be set up in the non-production environment where the onboarding activity happens. Once it's all set up there, it's then verified against the ISD data, which is fed back through. Next slide, please, Claire. So this is, again, a mock-up screen that I produced for Everard, which is just a simple screen that says a power trading company, these are the MPIs and market role pairs, and it's just a simple request button to say, can I have a DIP ID to map against that particular pair? And that data will either be fed manually or automatically into the ISD, and a field at the end to feed the DIP connection provider. So we wanted one size that fits all, and I think we've achieved that.
Yeah, that's really so. Okay.
Yeah, sure. Next slide. Hi. Afternoon, Kevin Gleeson, security architect in the design team. Quickly run through the need to get this information before anybody connects to the DIP. So from a registration perspective and PKI certificate, we need information regarding who the nominating officer will be, SROs, AROs, and any technical contacts, so that these can be configured beforehand. The nominating officer will need to go in and complete vetting and registration before any user can log into the DIP and request certificates. So that's for us is a key stage in ensuring organisations connect securely to the DIP. We'll be sending some further information out around the process for doing that as well. Once the company's been vetted and registered, the DIP manager will invite users who have completed the registration to log into the portal and start configuring the setup within there. There isn't really a lot more than that. It's quite a simple process. Part of the nomination or the nominating officer vetting is for global science contact company, verify the nominating officer is who they say they are. There's a requirement then, which is quite key, that a text record needs to be added into the DNS system, which VeriSign will verify exists before they complete vetting. So there's a slight difference to, I think, what happened in faster switching, but a needed requirement in there. So there will be a time internally for companies to allow for that TXT record to be added to their DNS system. And that's about it from the PKI perspective. Is that you again, Chris? Well, that's covered it all. Thanks, Chris.
Thanks, Alison. Okay, so that's the technical side of it, so top and tail it. We'll do the testing, as we already said. That will happen in a non-production environment. So that will be, can you send messages? Can you receive them, including the invalid messages and anything else? Once that's complete, we'll do the final confirmation. We'll tell the code qualifying bodies they completed their onboarding. Over to you to finish your qualification processes. That will continue. we'll do a final sense check. So the initial checks to make sure that all of the information you provided remains extant, i.e. you're still in the business, you still want to be where the market role is, and then we'll continue from there and wait for the qualification process. And then there's a little bit once the onboarding itself is complete before we let you go live. So on the next slide, please. Which is the access to production. So once all that's completed, the code bodies, so Red Code, BSE Code, will come back to us and say, fantastic, qualification complete, if that's applicable to you. Obviously, if you're not a DCP, we'll just crack you on. But if you go through the party route, the code route, sorry, they'll come back and say it's complete, so that they're happy for you to use the DIP as well. We'll then move you into the production environment. There needs to be a requirement for you to update your certification at that point, and make sure that what you did in the non-prod environment whilst you're onboarded is true in the production environment, and that should be just a few couple of fairly simple processes, I'm sure you can imagine, and get certifications as well. And that's it. Crack on, start sending messages, start doing how you want to do it. If you want to know more about the enduring processes in terms of funding, governance, arrangements, change processes, everything else, being advert out to issue 101, which is available details on the BSC website. There's contact details coming up shortly for that as well. And come and see what's going on. There's a consultation on that being issued tomorrow, or about the more of the enduring arrangements in terms of governance and processes as well. Next slide, please. That's me there for now, or one of my colleagues. Ignore the rest. That's the one you need to know about. That's the enduring stuff as well. That's it from us. Richard.
Cheers. Oh, Alice, have you got the ability to go back? Could you go back to the start? Well, say the start slide. It's near the start. Yes, that's the one. Oh, next slide. No, sorry. Forward to no. There we go. That's the one. So the guys have just talked you through quite a lot of detail about the onboarding process. So just to summarise what we've just been through, because some of that will be the enduring process, but a lot of you will be sitting there thinking, well, how is some of that relevant to the programme? So, of course, you need to come along at any point in time when you're being invited into CIT, SIT, and go through the initial application process in a similar way to what Chris talked about. We'll go through the same process that we talked about there. Once you're into the DIP, stages 2 and 3 are a parallel process. So setting up your organisation, which Rob talked about, and applying for your security certificates can happen in tandem with one another. So that will all be part of the programme process as well. And then obviously the completing testing phase, which we've got here, will be slightly different for the programme than it will be in an enduring state. So obviously during the programme, we'll follow the programme testing phases and all of the requirements that are given out as part of the testing. Of course, when we get into an enduring model, that will be different, and we'll go through the enduring process that Chris talks about in line with the qualification as in industry qualification for new participants. So hopefully that just distinguishes a little bit around what was presented there as an enduring model and how that will be applied in the programme. So that's just a high level. So when we say access to production, obviously from a programme perspective, that's more about when we start migration and we start the actual cutover activities. So I think that's it. Alice, if you can just cut to the last slide, which saw the contact details again, that'd be great. How are we for time, Claire? 10 minutes. Okay, so that seems like we've got time for some questions, although we maybe thought we didn't. But just before we jump to the questions then, if we've got anything. Again, here's some contact details for everybody to capture. Your future contact, any queries on the DIP is as you've been doing them so far. So via the PPC mailbox, and then we can sort those out as relevant. Some of those queries you see may be testing related rather than pure DIP, so they need to be channeled in the right way. So if you continue to use your PPC team as your primary point of contact, that'd be great. And just a few next steps from us as a DIP team. Obviously, as I said at the start, we're working in conjunction with Avanade to deliver the DIP in time for M9. So currently in the build phase, getting ready for our own PIT activities before we go into CIT at M9 and currently we're on track for that. So hopefully that was useful. A bit of a whistle-stop tour for the onboarding. I don't know if we're making these slides available post today, but again, some of the detail in there will be there for you to browse in a bit more at your own time rather than the whistle-stop. Claire,
Yeah,
got some questions?
we have. So we have got a couple of questions that have come through on Slido. We've got 5 minutes,
Yeah.
so I'll just pick a couple out. So
They won't be for me, so.
jump in and help. It's like mastermind, isn't it? Right, so first then, so will the DIP become the natural home for future deprecated DTN flows? Does the DIP eventually replace the DTN?
Right, I'll just take that one. That's very much a long-term enduring thing. So at the moment, I think it's just over 50% of existing data flows, if you exclude the Green Deal data flows, are going to stop being used and will be used as DIP interfaces. There is no plan at this time for the remaining data flows to migrate to DIP. However, obviously as the industry evolves and changes, I know Ofgem are doing an industry code review at the moment, so there may be some implications for that. REMA's going through at the moment, which is going to redesign a lot of the market arrangements. So the honest answer is, as the market evolves, there may be a shift away from DTN into DIP because it suits the market needs and the industry needs better. I'm not privy to any conversations to that extent at the moment, is the short answer to that one.
Okay, thank you. So next question, can we leverage the nominating officer verification process undertaken for faster switching for MHHS DIP onboarding? So you can.
Yeah, that's me. No, it is separate for global signing. It's a different process for signing up and vetting and registration. So I don't believe we can follow or pass through what happened in faster switching.
What we will be doing though is we'll be issuing out the process in detail so you can understand the steps involved, the time taken, and the relevant resources you'll need in order to complete the certification process. So whilst it can't be, you can't leverage your existing one, we'll give you clear guidance as to what that process is, and that should be coming out in the near future.
Just from our perspective as well, from an assurance point of view, we need our own audit trail for how we got that nominating officer and how we got the details. So that's why we need you to do it again separately for the DIP.
Thanks, Chris. So next question then. So placing reliance, certs into the DIP from supplier certificate authority, should the supplier or the DIP connection provider upload them, and does it matter?
That's definitely you again, Kevin.
So would you like me to say it again?
Yes, please.
So for placing reliance, so certs into the DIP from the supplier certificate authority, should the supplier or the DIP connection provider upload them? Or does it not matter? Both either.
So I think the answer is both, that one. So if you are just a party not using a DIP connection provider, you're responsible for your own certificates, obviously, one for signing and one for your MTLS. If you're a DIP connection provider, it's an MTLS certificate, your own MTLS certificate, and then you're using certificates from the supplier, which they will give to you. Is that the right answer? Hopefully that answers the question.
Okay, thank you, Rob. Got time for a couple more. So is the DIP identifier embedded in event message traffic?
Yes.
Yes, excellent. Nice and quick. DIP connection ID, where is this used? In message payload or as part of the TLS connection?
It's used in the payload.
In the payload. I don't understand any of these words, but I'm just trusting you now, Rob. I'm just looking for the popular ones. So last one then. Let's have a look. We now have a NOM officer, SRO and ARO for SMART, CSS, and now the DIP. Why do we have duplication if it's the same officer? Can the same verification apply?
Everybody has that.
Chris has already answered that, hasn't he?
Okay.
It's to do with the audit trail, primarily.
Okay. Thank you, Chris. Right, so I think I will draw a line and do it there. Thank you, guys. I will let you off.